Like,
So, Professor, you said there was no final in this class other than the final project?
yeah,
Yeah.
just the final project, no exam.
So are we allowed to show up into the classroom though? Because
Uh,
I have an online final that I have
Uh-huh.
to take, and I was just wondering if this classroom will be occupied.
It won't be during that time. But the room may not be open. I'm probably not gonna come here during finals week too, because, yeah. But if it's open, you're free to use it during that
Yeah,
time.
okay, I was just making sure. They're just checking me if this room was open.
Yeah, I mean, they reserve a time and the room for all the final exams, so no one will be here. But that's probably the problem, that no one will be here to open the door.
Got any plans for summer?
Um, I haven't thought that far yet. I'm in 1 week at a time mode right now. But just relaxing, probably just catching up on sleep.
Got a flight to catch on the 15th.
Oh, where are you going?
Norway,
Oh, that's cool.
celebrating 17th of May, and then probably celebrating grandma's last birthday.
Dang.
Is the assumption.
Hmm.
So,
She lives up there?
yeah, she's born and raised in Norway.
Gotcha. I was there, well, not in Norway, but I was in the Netherlands last summer. It's beautiful. It's beautiful out there.
Netherlands was cool. The airport.
Oh yeah, it's fun.
Schiphol is such a good airport.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever, I don't know where you landed. You might have actually landed on the runway out in the middle of the field.
Uh-huh.
It's like a 45-minute taxi from the runway to the actual terminal.
We didn't arrive in Norway. We actually or we landed in Paris actually, and then we did kind of a Euro trip, and then we ended up we left from Schiphol. Yeah.
Yeah, no, if you're landing at Schiphol, if you're taking, like, there's an international runway, it's like in the middle of a tulip field. It's so
Oh,
cool.
that's beautiful.
I know, but it was like a 40-minute taxi, man. You're driving the plane, you look out to the left, and it's just a freeway going alongside. You're driving next to them for like 20-30 minutes.
That's funny. My parents were there recently, actually. They were able to see the tulips. So when we went, we went in August of last year, me and my wife, and so we didn't get to see the tulips, but my parents saw them.
Yeah, they're good looking. It's interesting how they base their economy off of tulips.
Yeah.
Just a strange thing to base it off. I guess they were expensive back in the day, but
Right.
I feel like that's all your eggs in one basket.
Mhm.
We have some more slides. I started today with that, so my laptop and because God knows. Yeah. And then I got the shot project as well. Oh, that's really, yeah. That project is one stressing that. So, I don't know, last minute. Last minute, we can figure out. Just like, guys, no, you don't have to know. I should probably know this. I love the guy, but he's just. You can just ask them about I'm assuming you can just ask them for most of the. Well, I have a question to ask them, so. Oh. Yeah, we're doing, I'm trying to do factor safety for it, somebody's doing number of cycles for it. Should be easier. That's what I need to know. No, I don't even know factor. I still need my stress, my principal stresses, so Bryce is doing that. And then we have another guy that chose there, so Bryce is doing our speed body diagram, our he's doing moment diagram, and then just been. And give me those pictures. Free going diagram, ship the rod, and then get it by load. This week. Thinking that again. Yeah, April. Just so that's that. I think that was the issue. April. Spit out some. Stays the law. My group basically runs out the door the moment it's a team side. I think I'll be the one stuck. I'm not gonna do that, but they want easy coverage. I'll get my. We just do on the final day. Or next week. Yeah. Next week. Or last day of class. It'll do online. I think it would be in person. Yeah. Mine's on. Steady guy ever. I want your son. $12. You. Saturday, Sunday, yeah. Oops. I hear. Send it up. Right now for everybody.
All right, it's 1 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing today? Good to hear. All right, so this is the last day I'll be talking. So we are talking mostly about computer ethics today. So we'll talk a bit about that and what that really means. Okay. I do have a few announcements. So hopefully everyone got the email on Tuesday about the final presentation schedule. So it worked out really well this semester. We have 4 groups going on Tuesday, 4 groups going on Thursday. So make sure at least one person in your group should be aware of when your group is presenting, and make sure you're ready by the presentation date. Okay. All right. So the first 4 groups are on Tuesday, and then next are on Thursday. So the templates and rubrics for the final presentation and the final report are all on Canvas at this point. So if you go onto Canvas and you go to the week 15 page, you'll find all the information on that. Okay. The template isn't really much. It's just, has all the different sections that I expect to see on the presentation and the report. Just make sure that you kind of organize it around those sections, right? Because basically what I'm going to be doing next week is that I'm going to be listening to your presentations. I'm going to have the rubric right in front of me, and then I'm just going to be filling things in, based on that. Okay. Next week, what I'll do is I'll open up an assignment on Canvas as well for you guys to submit your presentation slides. In case I need to go back and look at it, as I give you your grades. Okay. And then next week I'll open up an assignment for you to turn in your final report as well. Okay. So for your final report, I only need one person to submit the final report. Please don't have multiple people in your group turn it in. So make sure you guys discuss and see, which person in your group is going to submit that final report. Same thing with the slides. Okay. So for the format for the final presentations next week, I think I mentioned it in the email that it is going to be virtual. So just to kind of make things a little bit easier, I know, you guys are kind of all over the place right now, libraries, studying over your guys' place. So I thought I'd just make it a bit more flexible and we'll do it all over Zoom. So please make sure that you are on Zoom. So you guys don't have to all be physically in the same place to present. As long as everyone in your group is in the Zoom call, and you have a working microphone, that's fine with me. Please test, if you plan on doing that, please test your microphone, just to make sure that it works. Last time I taught this class, there were a couple people who didn't have working microphones, and then their group members had to kind of make up for them, which is not comfortable for anyone. So I think probably the easiest thing would be for you guys to kind of meet all in one physical place and maybe all present on one computer where the microphone works. Or if you guys are all planning to present separately in different places, just make sure that everyone's microphone works so that we can hear you guys. Okay. So do all that testing, do all that practice kind of beforehand. If you need my help to test, if you want me to open up a Zoom room for you just to kind of test and see if your microphone works, I can do that really quickly as well. Okay. All right. Any questions on the schedule for next week or just the requirements for the final project? Also because someone asked before class today, we do not have a final exam in this class. I know the registrar scheduled the final exam just because it just does one automatically, but you don't have to report here during that time. In fact, I probably won't even be on campus at the time. So the only requirement that we have left in this class, or the only assignment, is just the final presentation and the final report. Okay. Okay. All right, and so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started for today. So before I actually start today, I do want to show you a video. It's not often that in engineering classes we get to show videos from outside. That's mostly reserved for the humanities courses. But today is kind of an appropriate thing. And you'll see kind of what video I have planned after that. Because usually if you look up engineering videos on YouTube, it's just some middle-aged Indian guy kind of giving you a lecture on how to take integrals and stuff like that. So it's not that, it's a short 1-minute video, but I hope you guys enjoy it. Right, so let me go ahead and share my screen. You need sound. And actually, let me do this too, because last time I did this last year, my YouTube was amusing. Maybe you've seen that clip before, but basically the point of that clip was just to show you that we live in a world nowadays which we use computers kind of on a daily basis. Not only laptops, desktop computers, but we all have a computer basically in our pockets with our phones, and those computers are always kind of collecting information about us. And it's kind of become a big issue nowadays in terms of what should be the limitations of this, and how much is this kind of encroaching on our privacy. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with that. So the topic for today is computer and technology ethics. Okay. So like I mentioned, basically whenever you use the computer to log on to the internet, look up something, things like that, it's kind of unavoidable at this point that some kind of information is being collected about you, by the companies that run these services, Google, Apple, things like that. Okay. And as a lot of these tools kind of get developed, and we kind of put more of our lives on online, not only in social media, of course, too, but also just doing simple things like paying bills, ordering things, purchasing food, things like that. This all of this kind of provides opportunities to collect information about us. And granted, most of this data collection is done, not with malicious intent. And so a lot of times, a lot of this information collected on us to make our lives a little bit easier, right? So Amazon can kind of predict what you want to buy. Google can kind of find out exactly where you want to go, things like that. Okay. But then, there becomes the question of, when is too much information, when is it too much? When do we kind of put a limit on this? Because, kind of the issue of personal privacy kind of becomes into play. Right. So we're going to spend a little bit of today talking about that. Of course, this is kind of one of those things that everyone kind of has a different opinion about. Some people kind of hold the opinion that, maybe we're past the point of no return. There's just so much information about it already available online that it's, and once it's out there, it's kind of hard to bring it back. There's been so many times even just in my daily life, where I'll get on the computer, open up a web browser, and then the internet kind of knows kind of exactly kind of what I'm looking for. It's to the point where I think Google probably knows exactly what I'm gonna name my firstborn child before you and I do. Right? So let's talk about computer privacy. All right. So when we talk about privacy, or when people think about privacy, at least from a digital point of view, there are a few different types of privacy that we can discuss. Okay. The first is called informational privacy. Informational privacy has to do with safeguarding personal information about yourself that you may not want other people to know about. So of course, this, I think this is probably the first type of privacy that people think about when they think about, privacy from all these kind of technology and apps and things like that. Okay. Now, of course, this can get violated. Companies can kind of encroach on this by collecting information about its customers without them explicitly knowing. Okay. So some information that you may not want other people to know about are things like your job status, your income, your purchasing habits, your medical conditions, political affiliations, all these information that people usually hold kind of pretty intimate. They don't really like sharing. If it was out there at some point on the internet, then it's probably out there and within some database within a tech company as well. I'm always amazed at just the algorithms that kind of go into this stuff. Even things that you don't kind of explicitly put into a computer, they kind of somehow know. I remember this one time when I was in grad school. I had just had a conversation with my advisor about purchasing standing desks for the lab. And so this was just a conversation that I had just verbally with my advisor. I didn't, nothing was said on a computer. I didn't chat this anywhere or anything like that. As soon as I finished that conversation with my advisor, I go back to my computer and I get a personalized ad for myself for standing desks. From my computer, and nothing had been said. I'm wondering if it's because maybe my advisor was searching for it on Amazon before that, and just like geographically, then that kind of sent an ad my way about that. But the fact that it at the time, I remember being really creeped out because I'm like, I didn't say anything about this online, but somehow Google knew that I was talking about standing desks with my advisor, and my advisor's office wasn't bugged or anything to my knowledge. So yeah, it gets a bit too far. I don't know if it's just the algorithm just took a lucky guess or not, but yeah, there's a lot of ways to collect information about yourself that you may maybe you're not aware of. Okay, another type of privacy is physical privacy. Yeah, now you all are going to get ads for standing desks. Okay. So physical privacy, the name kind of implies that it's something that kind of physically that happens to you, but what we deem to be physical privacy is kind of a bit more beyond that. Okay. So physical privacy refers to the movement of something, physical. It could actually be a physical object, or it could be something as like a phone call, something that's kind of invading your privacy that way. Okay? So this is becoming a big issue nowadays too with robocallers. And so, the most common way that computers and technology can kind of violate your physical privacy. I mean, the most extreme way would be, what would be, maybe your physical location is kind of disclosed to someone that you didn't approve of. But even just giving out your phone number, or some kind of direct way to contact you to either advertisers or people looking to scam you, and people calling you unsolicited. These are all ways that your physical privacy can be violated. You hear about it all the time on the news about, companies having data breaches where, hackers go in and steal people's phone numbers, steal their identity. Um, companies selling information, selling phone numbers at certain ad agencies and things like that. Just last year, actually, I lost my cat, or my cat got out of my house. And I was kind of posting kind of everywhere on all kinds of social forums and things like that on Facebook, to see if anyone can help. And I got so many, I would say at least 6 or 7 different texts and calls from people who say they found my cat, but it was just a scam. So, and ever since then, I learned to not put my own personal information on just random Facebook boards, which seems very obvious, I know. But I was pretty desperate at the time. I really wanted to find my cat. But since then, I kid you not, I get 3 or 4 spam calls or spam texts every single day, just because there was that brief period of time where I was answering every single text, every single call from unknown people, because I was looking for my cat. I get them in the middle of lecture sometimes too. So sometimes on the recordings you'll see me kind of peek at my phone, is because there's a scam caller calling me in the middle of the lecture. Yeah, so it's robocallers and scam calls have become a big issue. I did, thankfully. She was in my backyard. I have no idea. So she got out the front, and then somehow, but she's the most unathletic cat in the world. But somehow she was able to climb the fence and go into the backyard and hide inside this pot for like 3 days or something like that.
3 days?
Yeah, she was out there for a while. I was surprised. But she's home. She's safe and sound, so it's all good. I made one scammer very upset with me because he was trying to he was trying to skim my number, and so he tried to make this account on Google Phone with my phone number, and he said that I needed to send him like a confirmation code, which at that point I clearly knew it was a scam. So I just kind of led him on, and I kept giving him the wrong confirmation code. And then eventually he caught on, and he called me some names that I can't really repeat here in the class. That was definitely a scam. All right, and so the last type of privacy, a little bit similar to the first type of privacy that we looked at, is called proprietary privacy or identity privacy. So this refers to using your identity or your likeness or your name without your consent. So I think not too long ago, the definition of this kind of mostly was kind of referred to the use of your name and your personal information to open maybe lines of credit or kind of, I'd say, kind of classical identity theft in that way. But nowadays, with the use of AI and stuff like that, this has kind of evolved, and people can kind of use your likeness or even kind of recreate your voice using AI to make you kind of say things that you didn't actually say, or maybe put you into a video that you didn't agree to, and or you weren't even there. So no one's doing deep fakes this semester, but it's definitely becoming a big thing. People using AI to kind of use your likeness to do things that you may not agree to. Okay, so these are all types of privacy that and there's of course more than this as well, but I'd say these are kind of the 3 main categories that I think people think of when they first think of kind of computers and privacy and all that stuff. Okay. All right, any questions on this so far? Okay, good. All right, so like I mentioned earlier today, that even though computers are collecting a lot of information about ourselves, most of the time this was not done with malicious intent, right? At least that wasn't the original intent for these developers, right? And the reason, the whole reason we're kind of talking about this in this class is that, all of these systems that utilize this information, all the social media platforms, all the digital platforms, all the apps that we use, were developed by engineers, right? So I think I feel pretty comfortable saying that, for the most part, the engineers who develop these tools, develop these systems to collect this information aim to provide a social utility more so than, for any kind of bad stuff. So I know the majority of the students in this class, most of you guys are mechanical engineers, but I think it's the world is kind of evolving where it's more than likely you're going to be you're going to be you may work on some kind of software, maybe not something that's public, but maybe internal to your company as well. So talk about this is useful. Right? And so this kind of raises the question of utilitarianism, right? So if you recall from a few weeks ago, we brought up utilitarianism as developing, or society should kind of act in a way that benefits society as a whole, rather than kind of protecting individual freedoms. But this is kind of a, digital privacy is kind of a very classical case of, how do we analyze this, or what social utility is good enough to kind of, sacrifice some of our individual liberties, individual privacy. So let's talk about that. So let's talk about individual privacy versus social utility. All right, so let's mention a few of these systems that just by their nature kind of rely on collecting information from people to provide a public good. Okay. So the first one I think that people come to mind with this is just criminal background checks. Okay. A lot of times when you're applying for a job, or when you're purchasing something like a firearm, part of that process involves a criminal background check, just to make sure that the person you're either hiring, or the person that you're selling a firearm to is someone that's not going to abuse that or use it for harm, or at least it becomes part of the evaluation criteria, right? And so in order to have a criminal background check, we have to have some database of people's past criminal activity. So generally speaking, I think people see a criminal background check, that whole system, that database, as something that's good, right? Right. And the next example is credit cards. Right? Something that I think most of us kind of use on a daily basis, but but part of the system that makes credit cards work is by collecting information about us, right? So everyone has a credit score. So the credit score is a numerical value, which which kind of details kind of how reliable you are in terms of paying off your debts and things like that, right? Whenever you use your credit card, you're basically asking your credit card company to purchase something for you in advance, right? So you go to the store, you buy something from Target, you pay with your credit card. You're not paying Target right there. Your credit card company is paying Target for that service. And then you later on are going to pay your credit card company for using their money temporarily. Okay. And so the fact that we can have this system, the fact that we can kind of on a almost several times a day, oftentimes, use our credit card company's money to purchase things, that whole system kind of relies on your credit score and being able to collect information about yourself, so that your credit card companies know that you are someone that's reliable, someone that's going to pay off their debts, right? Otherwise, the company wouldn't let you use their money. Right? No one would let you use your money if you have a reputation for, for not paying off your debts, right? And the fact that we can collect this data and that it's kind of stored on you kind of provides a really big convenience for a lot of us. So we don't have to carry around a lot of cash, and we can kind of put things on our credit card. We can order things online. It makes it easier to in that sense. Okay. All right. Another one that is, I think, very, very controversial, and so maybe it's kind of controversial to put here is facial recognition software. Okay. So I'll be the first to say that this is a technology that I personally don't think is good. For computers or your phones or whatever to be able to recognize the features of your face and kind of take that and kind of immediately identify your identity from that. I think personally is a bit too far, but it's undeniable that it's also provided a lot of convenience for a lot of people too. A lot of people just unlock their phones just by staring at it nowadays. But even beyond that, a lot of security companies are using that to hunt down criminals, find them in certain locations. You see it in kind of spy movies where people there you see James Bond and stuff or whatever, scanning security cameras and using facial recognition software. It's not that advanced quite yet, but it's definitely used in that sense, right? So that's definitely something where I'm personally kind of on the fence about. Okay. Another one that's good. So I'll give the name of the exact service, but it's kind of beyond that, which is Google Earth. Right. So that was kind of mentioned in the video at the beginning today, where Google has these cars that just kind of drive around and just kind of take pictures of the surrounding in the streets, right? It's really useful whenever you're trying to navigate somewhere, and you want to find out kind of what you're looking at, what exactly to find, especially if you're trying to find that weird venue with the weird sign that you can't really find otherwise. So Google Earth is a great service for that. But sometimes you might just be walking on the street and then all of a sudden you're on Google Earth, just because the Google car just happened to drive by. So that's kind of another example of a service, right? Provides a public good, but also at the same time, collects information without people's consent as well. Okay? And of course, you can find a lot more examples of this as well. So you can think about maybe real-time location tracking on your phone, recording devices at schools, how ethical is that, how if that violates privacy, but people make the argument that maybe we need to do more surveillance at schools to keep kids safe, especially in America too. So there's lots and lots of examples of this. So in all of these examples, there's always it always kind of boils down to an argument of, yes, I think it's undeniable for a lot of people that these services and these technologies, they do provide a social utility. At the very least, maybe like a big convenience, but in the most cases, maybe something that's absolutely necessary for our daily lives. Okay? And so, of course, because of this, there's kind of two arguments. And so the first argument, the ones that kind of advocate for stronger privacy laws are the ones that argue kind of for a respect for persons or respect for rights type of view. Okay? So this is the kind of argument that privacy advocates usually do. Right? And in fact, a lot of these battles with personal privacy and things like that are being fought, through the legal system, through legislation, things like that, right? It's very similar to kind of what we talked about on Tuesday with the environment, where most companies are not going to proactively kind of change what they do, because a lot of these kind of bigger companies like Amazon, Google, Apple, they've made a lot of money, honestly, off of collecting information and using it for certain purposes. So they're not going to just give that up without anyone forcing to. And so the only the way a lot of people see is that the only person or the only entity that can force these companies to do something is the government. And so I think every election cycle, you see either a proposition or some kind of act or some kind of law that's being considered, with regards to privacy laws. And it's something that evolves kind of every single day, because new technology kind of comes out. There's just new ways to collect information and store it. It usually always takes a while for the law to catch up. Okay. Okay, on the other side of the coin, you have the people who argue from a utilitarian perspective. And so, usually these people kind of argue that, all these services, all these technologies, they are providing a really big public good, for people. And in some cases, preventing a lot of harm from happening in terms of when information is used responsibly to prevent, attacks and things like that, right? And so these people always say that the public good always outweighs the relatively small, cost to an individual person. These people usually point to, all the responsible ways to use data and all the good things that it's done, up until this point, right? But of course, everyone kind of has their own opinions on this, and they're all valid. So, I'm not going to tell you, which way to feel or not, right? We only have, not even a full lecture to kind of really talk about this, and so, this is not something that will be resolved, I think, at least in the near future, because I think you have people kind of on both sides of this argument, and even kind of everything in between too, right? And so, where should we kind of draw the line in terms of that? All right, any questions on this so far? Okay. And so, of course, we don't always have the time to kind of, really kind of wait and kind of see where this argument goes. These kinds of technologies and this kind of data collection is affecting people's lives kind of right now, right? And so a lot of kind of what a lot of the laws that currently exist and a lot of the ways that we currently do things are kind of they've kind of resulted from an attempt to find a creative middle ground, right? So let's talk about kind of what's been done so far. Okay. And so, one way that we've been trying to kind of navigate this space is there's been a lot of talk about consent, right? In terms of individuals should have the right to kind of consent, to what kind of information is collected about them and what kind of information is stored about them by these companies. any time that you can, you expose someone to a risk, physical risk, privacy risk, right? As long as they're fully informed of these risks and they consent to it, that always is a great way to kind of approach this, right? And so if you remember, a few weeks ago, we talked about this idea of free and informed consent. Right. I think if people were made aware of exactly kind of what information is being collected about them, and they have an option to kind of opt out of it, that's one way that they can kind of feel better about that, right? Because I think a lot of these issues, a lot of kind of the negative feelings towards this is just people just don't know exactly what information is being collected about them, because there's of course direct information of your own personal identity, things like that, but also kind of indirect as well, right? Um, I don't know about you guys, but whenever I get into a car, I always turn on Google Maps just to tell me, if there's traffic or anything like that. But because of that, Google probably knows exactly, the exact route I take to work, all the restaurants I like to eat at. And of course, they're using that information to give me ads and to, to do other stuff as well. So, not only is it the direct information about you, but just information about your patterns. So being able to, informing people in terms of the information that that are being collected about them and how that affects their privacy, of course, is a great way to go about this, right? The problem with this is that this is not always easy to do, right? Because a lot of the algorithms and a lot of the databases and a lot of the the technicalities of this data collection is very, very technical. And so kind of sharing that information and talking about how it's being used is not the easiest thing to communicate with people, because these are these are algorithms that are developed by by really, really smart engineers. And then there's also the legal aspect too, where part of the reason why consent has become really important is so that if you give your consent about something, you kind of forfeit your right to sue the company over anything that you may have, right? So whenever you whenever you download a new app, or you purchase a new iPhone or something like that, or a new Android phone, there's always something that you have to sign or virtually agree to before you use it, called the end user license agreement, right, or the privacy statement. I think everyone has seen it to some degree, right? So whenever you open up a new app or something, or use a new service, there's that gigantic wall of text that nobody ever reads. You just scroll all the way to the bottom, you click agree because you don't want to read that stuff, right? And so that agreement right there is the company's attempt to kind of give you in the information that you need to consent to using that service, right? But of course, they're written in a way that is not really useful. They're not written in a way for people to understand it. They're written in a way to kind of prevent any liability for the company. I think I went to an art exhibit once. I believe it was at the ACMA down in OC, where someone put each tech company's kind of end user license agreements, and then they kind of started at the ceiling, and then it just kept, there's just a wall of text that went down, and all of them went from all the way from the ceiling, which was I think maybe like a 12-foot ceiling, all the way to the ground. It was like kind of down there. So no one is reading that at all. And all this information kind of buried in legalese, so people don't really kind of read it. So there's now the question of are these companies really obtaining kind of this free and informed consent, or are they just trying to free themselves from liability? And so like I mentioned before, there's been attempts from privacy groups or not to kind of pass laws or pass legislation to protect people. It's a constant battle, but the first act of such was called the Privacy Act. This was back in 1974. This was kind of the very first attempt for the government to kind of intervene and kind of stop, these companies from collecting data without people kind of knowing, right? At this point, in 2024, this Privacy Act is largely obsolete. Basically none of its tenets or none of its laws are kind of relevant today. Companies have found a way around it, or newer laws have kind of kept up. But I bring it up because I think it provides a good framework for kind of the idea in terms of what data should be collected and how it should be stored and how it should be used. Okay. And so some of the main points of the act were the following. So the first point was that any kind of database that contains personal information, just the existence of such a database should be public knowledge. People should know. Okay. So if there's a server somewhere or a computer somewhere that has any kind of information about you, you should know about it, right? Remember, this was written in 1974, where 50 years ago there were way less computers than there are today. And so, probably, certain people knew the location of every single computer in the world at that point. But, nowadays this is almost impossible to do. But the idea is there, right? So the idea that, if a company is collecting information about you, you should know exactly where it is, okay? Or the fact, you should know the fact that it exists. Number two, whenever personal information is collected, it should only be used for narrow, specific purposes. So there shouldn't be kind of a general database that people can look up and just use your information for however they please, right? The information it belongs to you, and so if other companies or other people are going to use it, they should use it for a very specific purpose, and that this is designed to kind of prevent any kind of misuse or people kind of abusing your information. Okay? All right, number three, personal information should only be collected with informed consent. Okay. So kind of like what we talked about just a few moments ago. Okay. Number four, personal information should not be shared with any third parties. Basically, that last one is just completely thrown out the window. People companies share information, they sell it at kind of willy-nilly. Number five, information should only be stored for a limited amount of time. So there should be no kind of infinite databases. Because generally the longer information is kept about you, then, you know, that information tends to kind of multiply on each other. So, you know, after a certain amount of time, after collection, the company should delete your data. Okay. And number six, the companies or the agencies that do collect your information, they have a responsibility to ensure the safety and integrity of their data systems. Okay. And of course, that one also is thrown out the window because almost every week you see an article about, you know, Bank of America gets hacked and it's 1 billion users got their information was leaked to hackers. It's like, here we go again, you know. So, you know, but the idea is there, right? So you know, if you are going to collect information and you are going to store it and use it for your company's business operations, it's also your responsibility to protect. All right, any questions on this? Okay. All right, so that's enough about privacy. You know, there's definitely a lot more that we can talk about it, but for the last you know, 25 minutes of class today, I wanted to talk about copyright laws and ownership of computer software. So if you work in a field or if you work in a certain job that kind of requires you to produce code of some kind, this kind of becomes very relevant to that. Okay. And so the main question is, you know, when you produce a code, right, whether it be for a company or maybe for a research project or something like that, you know, who owns that code and how do you kind of protect your code from being kind of used by other people? Okay. So to kind of start this off, I have another story. So when I was in graduate school, you know, part of a lot of my graduate research and even nowadays, you know, you know, a lot of my research involves, you know, writing computer code to simulate blood flow. That's my kind of research expertise, right? So when I first joined my lab, we had there was one student who was close to graduating. He was an extremely productive student. He wrote his own CFD code from scratch, and it was great. It works wonderfully. You know, it was a big improvement over some of the other codes we were using in the lab. But you know, when he was about to leave, you know, the question of ownership kind of came up, right? So even though he wrote the code, you know, because he used that code to satisfy his degree requirements, technically the owner of that code was the university, not himself. And so of course he was very upset with this because he wanted to take that code to his next position and kind of use it there. But there was kind of a very long, kind of uncomfortable kind of dispute that kind of came out from this in terms of, you know, how can he use, you know, like who owns the code, you know, how can people use the code and things like that. So because a code is something unique, right? Because if it's something, you know, if you compare it to something physical, right? So let's say that your car, right? You own your car, right? And there's kind of no dispute about who owns the car. And in order to use the car, you have to kind of physically be in the car, and you can kind of protect that with your key, right? So you lock your car, you're the only one that has the key, and you can kind of really control kind of who makes use of your car. A code is something different. A code is a lot more easy to share It's just at the end of the day, just some data that's in a computer. And so you can kind of pass that to other people and they can use it kind of a lot more easily. And the protections for that are a lot more loose compared to physical objects. And this is pretty relevant too, because if I think everyone in this class has taken a programming class to some degree, right? It takes a lot of work to write a code, right? And so a lot of times you'll get your requirements and you need to write a code to satisfy those. It takes a lot of work and a lot of labor to kind of produce that. And if you think about kind of some of the issues and some of the problems, some of the challenges that professional computer scientists, professional coders have to do, right? It takes a tremendous amount of work, a tremendous amount of training in order to produce that code, right? It's not the best feeling where you've kind of worked all your life for something and then you work extremely hard on a particular project and you produce it, but then all of a sudden someone else kind of takes your code and takes credit for it and kind of reaps all the benefits. That's not the best feeling in the world. Um, so so to kind of combat this, oftentimes, people who write code use copyright laws or patent laws to protect their creative work, basically. And in fact, the general stance of the government is to write these laws in a way to protect these people, right? Because if on the one hand, if code were kind of easily shared and stolen, then I think almost nobody would feel motivated to kind of develop their own code. Because if kind of the general mindset at that point would be to just wait for someone to develop it, and then you just kind of steal it, and then you kind of reap all the benefits without putting in all of the effort, right? So the government, works very hard to kind of make sure that, whoever kind of puts in the work, puts in the labor of producing a code, testing it, making sure it works, that they're protected and that they're able to kind of reap the benefits of their hard work. Okay. But, you know, there are a few ways to kind of protect these ideas, and code is not the only thing that copyright and patent laws are applied to. So let's talk very briefly about kind of how copyright laws and patent laws work. Right. So copyright laws are designed to protect the expression of an idea. Okay? So copyright laws, you see them mostly applied to works of art, right? So books, movies, literature, songs, movies, things like that. you can't copyright, the general idea of a superhero, right? But you can copyright the expression or the particular instance of your interpretation of a superhero. Okay? That's evidenced just by just all the different types of Marvel movies that are out there, right? So they're all, I mean, all the Marvel movies are basically the same, but they're all protected by copyright because they're technically different expressions of the same idea, even though that idea is actually the same between all of them, right? On the other hand, patent laws protect the invention of a new idea. Okay? So things like new processes, okay? A new device, a new technology. So whenever you kind of hear the word inventor or invention, most of those are often protected by patent laws as opposed to copyright laws. Okay. And so you'll see patent laws used more commonly in kind of the technology and engineering space. So, let's say, SpaceX or whatever, they come up, they invent a new type of engine that runs off of, I don't know, runs off of water or something like that, right? That's something that would be governed by patents. Even though it's an engine, right? The idea of an engine has been done before. The fact that it contains new technology, a technology that hasn't been used anywhere else before, that would kind of be more suitable for patents. Patent laws are usually stronger in that sense too. Okay? All right. So where does this put computer code, right? And so computer code kind of exists kind of in this kind of middle ground between these two. Okay? On the one hand, you can consider it to be kind of the expression of an idea, right? An expression of code, right? To fulfill a certain task. But it's also, at the same time, kind of also the invention of a new process, maybe the new technology, a new way to kind of a new algorithm, a new way of doing things, right? And so when people write code, the question is, how do you go about protecting? Do you go apply for a patent or do you apply for a copy? Okay? For the most part, most of the times when people produce code and they want to protect it, they usually do so using copyright laws. Because a lot of the problems or a lot of the technologies that computers are used for, there's lots of different expressions of the same idea. Okay. So for example, there's probably a lot of redundant apps that you've seen that kind of all do the same thing, right? So there's Google Maps and Apple Maps and Waze, right? So just to name a few. Okay. Even before this, this was back when I was growing up, there was MapQuest. And so MapQuest was another website that you could use to plot out your map, right? So all these different apps, all these different programs, all these different services are all expressions of the same idea, right? To provide kind of directions and GPS to help navigate your way. Okay. Another example is spreadsheets. Right? So for spreadsheet programs, people use Google Sheets. There's Excel, Microsoft Excel. There's the free version that works on Linux that I use a lot called LibreOffice. Okay. All these are spreadsheet programs, but so they're all kind of expressions of the idea. There's no one company that holds the patent for all of spreadsheet programs in general. Okay. So to see, to ask the question of whether your computer program is able to be copyright, usually you can ask yourself, or you can kind of use these 4 tests. Number 1, the first criteria is that the expression of the idea must be original. Number 2, it has to be useful or functional. So someone has to be able to use it and it has to kind of be useful for them. Okay. Number 3, the expression must be non-obvious, and so there should be at least some creative work that goes into it. Now, this number 3 criteria is very subjective, of course, but that's usually within the eye of the copyright officer. And number 4, number 4 is to kind of, maybe you've invented something or maybe you come up with something that is actually quite different from everything else, right? So maybe you use number 4 to determine whether you should go for a patent or a copyright, right? Number 4 is that there must be several different ways to express the idea. And yours just has to happen to be one of them. Okay. All right, another criteria that's not explicitly listed here, and kind of that's kind of the trend nowadays, is that your idea must be marketed a little bit differently. So your branding or your name for it, or your the visual design, that has to be unique. So that becomes part of the judgment as well, especially if you're developing an app, right? So you can't develop kind of an exact copy of Google Maps and call it Google Maps and say that that's kind of an original idea. You know, it has to be kind of visually and design wise distinct enough from an existing product. You know, and that becomes a big part of the determination as well. Okay. All right, one last note before we wrap it up today. Is that you know, on the one hand, you know, people usually it's companies, right? So if you develop something for a company, they're going to be very sensitive to protecting kind of their intellectual property or protecting their rights, right? But there is you know, a huge movement nowadays towards open source software. Right. So that's probably a term that you've at least heard of in passing at some point. Okay. So the whole idea with open source software is to kind of go the complete opposite direction, right? So with open source software, you know, these are softwares that people develop. Usually they're not paid for. This is something that they're developing kind of as their own hobby. But instead of trying to protect it and hide it from people, you kind of share it with the entire world. So if you've heard of a website or if you use the website called GitHub, you know, this is kind of exactly what GitHub is designed to do. So a service like GitHub is designed to kind of take code that you want to share and put it into a format that's easy for people to kind of collect it and use it for themselves. And the idea with open source software is that you put your source code itself online so that people can kind of copy it and use it for whatever they want. The reason people would want to do this is to kind of help advance the technology, right? Because usually with these open source projects or open source codes, there's a place for people to provide feedback or provide improvements, right? So by opening up your software to others, you're able to kind of get comments and get feedback from people and improve the software. Or if anything, you know, people can take your software and kind of, you know, kind of develop it into a different direction and then kind of create maybe something new and something really cool. So in general, these open source softwares, they're seen as ways to kind of advance the technology or advance our knowledge in a much more fast way. A lot of research software, so or software that's been developed for research purposes, that's funded by the government. You know, usually whenever the government kind of gives funding to develop software, they have this stipulation that you must open source the software or put it out there for people to use. Because the way the government sees it is that, you know, they're paying these researchers to develop new knowledge, develop new technologies, and that should be shared with the public, right? Because oftentimes the government is using tax money for this, and so anything that's used for tax money is used for, the general public or as many people in the country should benefit from it as much as possible. Okay, so a lot of the codes that I worked on in grad school was open source. And kind of that story that I was telling you earlier with that grad student that developed his own code, eventually we open sourced it just because it belonged to the university. He wasn't happy about it, but that was kind of the only way that it could. Okay. All right, any final questions on this? Okay, all right. And so next time I see you guys will be next week for the presentations. And so next week might be a little bit hectic just because, you know, some presentations might run long. So let me just take a moment to say thank you guys for being a great class. It's been a great semester. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this class too. I know this class is different. We did a lot of economics. We did a lot of kind of just ethics too, but hopefully it was a good experience for you guys. So thank you guys and hope you guys have a good summer and hope I get to see you guys in the fall as well. Say again?
The presentations are on Zoom?
Yes, so they'll be on Zoom, so so you all of your group can present on Zoom. I'll probably just be in my office. You guys, I was telling earlier, you guys can all kind of get together in the same place and present in one place, or you can just do it all on your own computers. The only thing I ask is just to test, make sure your microphones are working. Because last time I did this, some people's microphones weren't working and just kind of, there were some technical issues. Mhm.
That's what we're thinking. Are these the midterms?
Yes, yeah, if you haven't picked up your midterms, you can come pick it up.
Well, it's just hard to, if you're like struggling, it's too hard. Yeah, just, yeah.